So welcome back to this emotion series. And today's emotion is not one of the ones that people find difficult to experience, but maybe they just want to experience a little bit more, and it's joy. And in this series, what I'm trying to do is to help you understand, to recognize, and to accept some of the emotions that I and many of the people that I work with experience, and you will also experience, and to help us build a map of understanding it, accepting it, and then being able to create tools or techniques that will create it a little bit more often. So with joy, there's two ways that I think about joy, and this comes from a couple of different influences. One is the Dalai Lama and one is Joe Hudson. Joe Hudson is an executive coach to some of the top people in some of the top companies even that you'll recognize. And he says that joy is the matriarch of emotions. And when emotions are welcome, joy is the kind of natural state or response. And the other, I think it's the Dalai Lama, says that joy arises from self-transcendence, which is ending the trances or stories that we tell about ourselves or the people and the world around us that keep us trapped or keep an emotion like joy away from us. So if we think about the matriarch and that kind of welcoming of emotions, typically when we experience negative emotions, we will judge ourselves and the emotion as bad. So the emotion isn't welcome. But typically when we do that, it actually hangs around a little bit longer. So if you say, for example, anxiety is a bad emotion, I want it gone. It's not very welcome. And it actually stays in our system and it builds up a little bit more. Whereas if we welcome anxiety and look forward to experiencing it so that we can recognize it, appreciate it, understand it, and accept and experience it a little bit more, there's like a playfulness or a lightness that comes from that response. And I think that some of that is joy. And so welcoming your experience, being with it more often, not numbing or distracting or suppressing your experience, will mean that you will experience joy a little bit more often. I've noticed this in myself. When I welcome my experience and when I welcome other people's experience, they experience a safety or a presence that then helps them kind of mobilize through the energy or the emotion that they're experiencing towards something that feels a lot lighter, like joy. The second way that I've thought about joy and those kind of positive emotions, again, back to that self-transcendence. Often we are at the mercy of and contained within and conditioned by stories. And stories are narratives that we've been given, that we've inherited, or that are pushed at us through society, through the social groups that we spend time in, through family and through relationships that we have. And when we recognize them, for example, one story is, I'm not good enough until I have a Ferrari, or until I'm a millionaire, I'm not worthy, or if I'm not producing or if I'm not productive, I'm not valuable as a human being. That is not a story that is yours. That is a story that we are given, that we're conditioned by. The other story that you could be conditioned by is, anger is not an emotion that's expressed in this family. Or anger is the only emotion that's expressed in this family. So then when you move through life and you interact with life in a different way, you will bump up against those stories and conditioning, and they might not be helpful. But when you can get curious about what it is that this tension that you're banging into is, and you recognize the story that underpins that, joy arises from going beyond that and seeing that there's another spaciousness beyond that story that was containing you. And so I would like you to be able to experience more joy. So there's two ways. One is welcome your experience a little bit more, or just start with accepting your experience. Welcoming sounds a little bit more difficult or a stretch if the experience is a difficult one. But the second is just recognize the narratives and stories that you've been telling, that you've been bumping up against, and maybe not have paid attention to. An easy way to do this is just to get curious about the emotions you experience, again, like anxiety, depression, anger, frustration, sadness, despair, any of those kind of emotions are signals that there's something here that's stopping you or blocking you, and I'm afraid of the consequence of going beyond it. But if we get really curious and clear about those things, joy will arise a little bit more. There's like this playfulness about it. The other thing is just get playful. I mean, we're in nature right now. There's lovely grass around. I'm not going to do it now, but I mean, tumble in the grass. Tumble where it's safe to do that. Get playful. Hang around with children that you have in your life. The the more playfulness and the more kind of aliveness that we create in our bodies, the more those kind of emotions like joy arise. The other thing just that underpins all of this is those kind of positive emotions we often experience and they're fleeting. When they show up, get really curious about what you were doing and who you were with and what stories you were telling about yourself or the people in the world around you, so that you can recreate or cultivate those emotions a little bit more often. But the other thing about all of this is, when your nervous system is not regulated and you're in a dysregulated sympathetic state, it's very hard for joy to be there. So when we perceive that there's a threat that we're in danger of, when we're creating threats or our attention is on negative things, it's very hard to create joy. So regulating your breathing, being in nature, spending time with loved ones that give you energy, spending time with friends that give you energy, will help your nervous system settle. You'll get co-regulation, so you'll share some of the emotion of safety, and you'll be better able to create those experiences of joy more often. So hopefully that's helpful, hopefully interesting. I'm really glad that you're here, and thanks for tuning in to this emotion series. Looking forward to seeing you in the next one.